The instant you feel compelled to explain yourself, the balance of power has already shifted and not in your favor. Think about it. A quiet accusation slips into a conversation. A colleague questions your competence. A partner reframes your words. Your body reacts before your mind does. Your pulse rises, stress hormones surge, and an internal alarm goes off. They're misunderstanding me. I need to fix this. So you rush to clarify. You justify. You add context. And in doing so, you expose yourself. Because people are rarely persuaded by truth alone. They respond to posture, tone, and perceived neediness. The one who overexplains signals dependence. The one who defends silently accepts the other person's authority to judge. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this centuries ago. Power, to him, was never about correctness. It was about control of the frame. The moment you argue your innocence, you step into someone else's narrative. You become the accused, standing in a courtroom that only exists because you agreed it did. But what if you didn't? Most people move through life in reaction mode, pulled by the opinions of others. A raised eyebrow triggers an apology. An accusation invites a defense. They live in a constant effort to prove their worth, intelligence, or goodness. It's exhausting, and it slowly erodes the self. There is another way to exist. A mode of being so grounded and internally anchored that insults don't bounce off you. They evaporate before landing. This isn't about coldness or arrogance. It's about shifting the source of your reality inward. Here, we break down the psychology of nondefense, why your biology urges you to react, and how to override it, how to reverse power dynamics instantly, how silence, when used deliberately, becomes more devastating than argument. But understand this. Adopting this stance requires letting go of something deeply ingrained, the need to be understood, approved of, and validated. Lose that need, and you become formidable. Your impulse to defend yourself begins early. As children, explanation was survival. When authority accused you, justification was the only escape. Over time, that pattern hardened. You learned that safety came from convincing others you were good. The problem is, you grew up, but the pattern stayed. Now you project authority onto everyone. Bosses, partners, strangers online, even adversaries. When you defend yourself, what you're really saying is, you are the judge. I am asking for mercy. And that posture carries the scent of submission. Humans, as primal as they are, sense it immediately. Machiavelli famously argued that fear is safer than love. In modern terms, respect is safer than understanding. When you rush to explain, you're choosing to be understood rather than respected. But leaders don't justify decrees, and apex predators don't narrate their movements. The moment your stability depends on someone else's agreement, you've handed them leverage. This is the illusion of the validating self, the belief that clarity will earn fairness. It almost never does, because the attack was never about facts. It was about dominance. The accusation was a test, and by reacting, you confirm their power. The first realization is this: there is no courtroom, no jury, no verdict, only your perception. Once you stop assigning others the role of judge, their accusations shrink into mere opinions, and opinions are just noise. So what happens when you don't react? Someone throws a verbal strike. You're being selfish. The old response would be a frantic defense, listing evidence, draining your energy. The alternative is stillness. Eye contact, neutral expression, silence. That silence creates a psychological vacuum. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with unresolved tension. When you refuse to engage, the other person is forced to confront the discomfort they created. Often, they begin explaining themselves, defending against your non-response. The dynamic reverses. This is emotional aikido. No resistance means no target. Without defense, the attack collapses under its own weight. But this takes control. Inside, your ego is screaming for retaliation. You must restrain it. Those who react reveal themselves, their values, their insecurities. Silence reveals nothing. It reflects the other person back to themselves, and that reflection is deeply unsettling. Sometimes, however, silence isn't practical. When words are necessary, they must never be defensive. Instead of pushing back, you redirect. One tactic is agree and amplify. If someone accuses you of something exaggerated, denying it validates the accusation. Instead, lean into it until it becomes absurd. Delivered calmly, This signals complete immunity to the insult and reclaims control of the narrative. This creates amused detachment, the highest form of status. Like an adult watching a child's tantrum. You don't argue. You don't escalate. You observe. Another tactic is refusing the role of defendant altogether. In conflicts, the one asking questions holds power. So you reverse it. Answer questions with questions. Shift focus from your actions to their reactions. This subtle move destabilizes manipulators because it denies them the frame they rely on. At a deeper level, this is not just strategy, it's philosophy. Other people's perceptions are not your responsibility. Their emotions are theirs to manage. When you stop carrying emotional weight that isn't yours, you regain sovereignty. Sometimes the most disarming move is calm agreement, not submission, but fog. Acknowledge factual truth without accepting the insult attached to it. Own the mistake. Reject the identity. This demonstrates security. Only insecure people fight relentlessly to appear flawless. None of this works if it's merely performative. Words are secondary. Frame is everything. Your internal state must support your external silence. Which brings us to the shadow. Insults hurt only when they touch something unresolved within you. If an accusation is entirely false, it slides off. But if it stings, it's pointing to work you haven't done yet. True immunity comes from self-knowledge. Owning your flaws before others can weaponize them. A person who has integrated their shadow cannot be shamed. There's nothing left to expose. Attacks pass through them like arrows through air. So here's the challenge. For 7 days, do not explain yourself. State facts. Accept misunderstandings. Resist the urge to manage perception. Sit with the discomfort until it dissolves. Watch what happens. Confusion. Then respect. Then magnetism. Because certainty is rare and irresistible. You are no longer reacting. You are choosing. You step out of the role of the child and into that of the sovereign. The world will try to provoke you. It thrives on reactions. Don't feed it. Protect your silence. Protect your frame. What makes non-defense so unsettling is that it violates an unspoken social contract. Most people expect predictability. Accusation followed by explanation, pressure followed by collapse. When you refuse to follow that script, you expose how fragile the interaction really is. The other person suddenly realizes they were never in control, only accustomed to your compliance. This moment of realization often manifests as irritation, confusion, or escalation. That escalation is not strength, it is panic. Understand this clearly. People who push hardest for explanations are rarely seeking clarity. They are seeking leverage. An explanation gives them material, words to dissect, motives to question, contradictions to exploit. Silence starves that process. It denies them narrative ownership. Without your participation, their story cannot advance, and most people do not know how to function without an audience or a reaction. This is why composure is so frequently mistaken for arrogance. When someone cannot access your emotional center, they project intention onto you. They assume manipulation where there is simply restraint. But emotional transparency is not a moral obligation. Access must be earned. When you stop offering explanations freely, people begin to treat your presence with more care, not because they understand you better, but because they cannot control you. Over time, this posture rewires how others relate to you. Conversations slow down. Accusations soften. People choose their words more carefully. Not because you demanded respect, but because you no longer reward disrespect with engagement. You become psychologically expensive to challenge. And in a world addicted to reaction, the person who does not react quietly becomes the one everyone watches. At a certain point, you realize the most radical act is not dominance, but refusal. Refusal to explain. Refusal to perform. Refusal to beg for coherence in the minds of people who benefit from misunderstanding you. When you stop offering yourself up for interpretation, something strange happens. Your presence becomes heavier. People feel it before they understand it. And those who once fed on your reactions begin to starve. This is the final shift. You are no longer managing impressions, correcting narratives, or fighting to be seen accurately. You are simply being. And that state is deeply threatening to anyone who relies on control, projection, or emotional leverage. Silence stops being emptiness and becomes a boundary so solid it cannot be crossed. What once felt like vulnerability becomes insulation. What once felt like exposure becomes invisibility to attack. So don't aim to be understood. Aim to be unmovable. Let the world misread you. Let it whisper, speculate, and distort. None of that requires your participation. Power is not loud. It does not explain itself. It waits. And the moment you realize you don't need permission to exist as you are, the game ends. Because you've stepped off the board entirely. You are no longer reacting. You are choosing. You step out of the role of the child and into that of the sovereign. The world will try to provoke you. It thrives on reactions. Don't feed it. Protect your silence. Protect your frame. And if this way of seeing resonates with the part of you that's tired of performing, hit the subscribe button today.